doing a tier list. You hear me? A tier list. Yeah. Believe it or not, we're doing a tier list again. Because these still exist, alright? Today, we're ranking albums from a band you probably might have heard, but probably might not have at the same time. Paramore. Most definitely my favorite Fueled by Ramen band. And definitely one of my favorite bands overall. Don't sleep on them, bruh. Don't sleep on them, bruh. Don't sleep on the Queen, Hayley Williams. Not but for real, Hayley's like the most valid white girl ever. She's invited to the cookout. They're kind of a band that I've been hearing slight glimpses of throughout my years. Throughout my adolescence. Throughout my childhood, too. And by going through the discography, there are so many songs that I've heard that I have apparently have heard before, but I didn't know it was by Paramore. Like, for example, Misery Business, Ain't It Fun, Still Into You, Decode, Hard Times. So without further ado, I want to get into this. Let's go. First album. Let's go. Where they all started. All we know is Falling, the debut album that came out in 2005. They were little fetuses back then, bro. This is when they were just learning the ropes. I'm not gonna lie, I don't really have that much to say about this album other than, you know, it's not bad. It's not great by any means. Let's not go there. It's not great. But, like, this whole album would show stuff that the band will eventually improve on later. Very quickly, though. Apparently, this album was recorded when I believe their bassist, Jeremy Davis, that left the band temporarily. And that's kind of what the main theme of this album was. As you can see from this, on the album cover, you see that shadow there was supposed to be resembling Jeremy, I guess. How the hell you leave on your debut album, bro? What the hell? It seemed like they had a pretty good idea out the gate, though, with this album. And it did turn to a bunch of songs that I did like. Like, there's hella moments on here, like the hooks, the riffs, Josh Farrow screaming on My Heart. Okay, that's probably the first time and maybe the only time I ever hear screaming on a Paramore album. That shit caught me off guard, then. I thought it was just gonna be Hayley this whole time. And all of a sudden, Josh comes with, but still, it's a highlight, though. I like that song a lot. It's probably my favorite song on there, other than Pressure. I would say, like, a good old B. Yeah, B. Might as well go with B. B sounds fine enough. It's Riot Time. Ugh. This album, you don't know how badly I want a physical copy of this album. Anyway, this album just immediately stuck with me. It's totally, well, not really totally different from their debut, but it's different. As you could hear, you could just hear in this album the improvements from the debut, especially the drumming. Thank you, Zach Farrow. Hayley's vocals getting way better, way more control, way more angst, and Jeremy Davis returned. Hopefully, that's the last time somebody leaves the group. There's a lot more variety in the sound on this. It's a lot more raw. It's a lot more angstier. It's a lot more punk. Like, this is the album that blew him up to the front and the center of the punk scene. You know why? Because the singles fucking popped. Yeah, so I'm talking Crush, 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 Hallelujah. That's what you get. And most of all, Misery Business, which is the song that blew everything up in the first place. And even because of the popularity of this album, they even made their debut album gain such a resurgence compared to when they first released it. Like, that debut album became such a cult classic among punk listeners. And Riot is a hood classic. This might be my second favorite album, I'm not gonna lie. And this is such an essential album. And yeah, they still needed to buff out a couple scratches, but they're starting to finally come to their own. And also, hashtag unretire Misery Business. Misery Business is most likely, probably, I think it might be the first Paramore song I've ever heard. Like, I've heard that shit a long time ago, and I didn't even know it was by Paramore. I didn't even know what the fuck a Paramore was. All I knew was Hayley Williams. That was it. You know why? Can we pretend that airplanes in the night sky? That was the only thing Paramore I knew, was Hayley Williams as a feature on Airplanes, and that's it. So yeah, this album gets an S from me. Maybe not to a lot of people, but this album gets an S from me. Brand New Eyes. Let's go. At this time, it was a little bit of a weird period in the Paramore lore, but we'll get to that. So now Paramore apparently have blown up to even higher heights with their song featured on the Twilight soundtrack, Decode. God damn, the song was everywhere. And I never even watched Twilight. And I don't even think I need to. Hey, at least they made that the bonus track to Brand New Eyes, because it's one of the best Paramore songs of all time. Anyway, as we get to the real meat and bones of Brand New Eyes, this started taking a way more mature direction here. Like, toning down the angst just a tad bit. No, actually, a lot, actually, compared to Riot. So far, Paramore is 3 for 3, because this album is fucking excellent. There's so much to these songs, they're just so good. Man, I don't know how this album is just so good. Maybe it's because of all the uprising tensions in between recording this album, but I don't want to say it's that. Tensions between the bandmates, specifically the Pharaohs, and it was definitely bleeding onto the songwriting and the themes. God, it turned out so good. I mean, not good for the band, but shit. They were literally writing songs targeted at each other. Like, this album definitely has one thing for me, is that, like, once I want to hear one song from the album, I'm gonna just end up listening to the rest of the album. Like, shit like Ignorance, All I Wanted, Turn It Off, Brick by Born Brick, and especially the only exception, that freaking lovey-dovey, hubby love song of all time. Like, there's still moments of fast-pacedness in these songs, but, like, there's also much more slower. Like, it gets slower. I definitely might say this is their best, their best album in their whole discography. And I think everyone else would agree with that statement too. So I'm going with another S. This definitely gets another S from me. Yes, sir. Ain't it fun? Living in every world. Ain't it good? Yeah. Is exactly what it looks like. You see 3 members? Yeah, about that. So yeah, apparently right after Brand New Eyes was released, at least a year later after it was released, Josh and Zach Farrow both decided to leave the band. In a little bit more of a dramatic way than it should have been. Mostly kind of being on Josh more than Zach, really. It was more of like a thing between Josh and Haley. And also a thing he said, he also even called him a manufactured product. Well, you joined the manufactured product, which I definitely disagree with. It's like Paramore's supposed to be a manufactured product and be a thing for Haley's solo career. Shit. It took her a long ass time for her to actually go solo, so yeah, I don't think that definitely wasn't it. So after all that drama shit happened, Paramore well, before this, they released their Singles Club EP. I'm not including it though. Don't ask. And decided to finally come back with the remaining members, and even adding new members along the way, because how can you go on without a drummer? So then they come out with their self-titled album, Paramore. What a title. This album is just completely different from all 3 of their albums. This album sounds like a complete departure from their first 3 albums. Well, I wouldn't say completely nothing like their pop punk glory, but let's just say they went pop. And it sounds excellent. I honestly thought the idea of them going from pop punk to full-on pop would just blow up in their faces, just like other certain bands that I just won't name. They didn't fumble the bag on this, and it actually turned out great. Now, is it better than Brand New Eyes or anything off of Riot? I wouldn't necessarily say so, but this just sounds like a reintroduction to the band. Pretty much acting like the first 3 didn't count, but it'll still throw in some elements here and there. And Haley, let me just say, Haley sounds as good as ever in this era. Like, seriously, especially for her voice, like, she was going off. Like, this is probably the best Haley's ever sounded, like, ever. This album throws in a whole bunch of, like, catchiness, and even some recurring themes on this album, like, just simply focusing on the future, and just the good and the bad. All in this catchy, fun, dance-filled masterpiece. And Ain't It Fun is one of my favorite songs of all time. And then also there's these ukulele interludes that be thrown into the track list somehow, which I didn't really care for at the first time I heard it. Once I really, like, settled in and actually realized it was, like treating it like an interlude, instead of being like, what the fuck is this ukulele? Not really as rock as they used to. More pop-leaning, but it's still good. It's still great. They knew what they were doing. It seemed like they didn't need Josh and Zach after all, because this sounds great with the remaining members as it is. Gonna make you wonder why you even try. After Laughter, this shit came out in 2017? This is probably, like, the first Paramore album that I was actually anticipating before it released. Okay, this sounds just completely different. Is this even the same band? That's what I thought. That was my initial first thoughts when I heard this album. This time it's even more pop than the self-titled was. But this time we getting funky, though. And Zach Farrow? Yeah, Zach returned after, like, 6 years, but no Josh. Josh is, like, does not give a fuck. But it also meant taking someone down with them. Yeah, Jeremy Davis decided to leave again. So now we're missing Jeremy. And he's over here starting a fucking SoundCloud rap career, which is going fantastic. Hey, at least we got Zach back. Also, Taylor York is a real one. He's a real G. He's like the glue that's keeping this whole thing together. And just think about it. There was really a time when Taylor York was like the only remaining member of Paramore at one time. Yes, Hayley Williams left Paramore at once. It wasn't really announced at all. This album is such a funky and poppy and upbeat, like, dance-scape filled with melancholic and sad lyrics. Damn. That's what the whole theme is. Okay, so post-recording me here to say a few more things because I'm fucking terrible because I'm fucking stupid and terrible at explaining shit, especially when it comes to this freaking album. What I meant to say was I like this album. Not the best, but it's one of their best. But it's still solid. And it just still means that Paramore don't miss. Hashtag Paramore don't miss. And they really did well in pulling off the theme of the album's title. And of course, this really sparks the biggest left turn in terms of the band's sound thus far. This time diving into new wave and synth pop and pulling it off really well. Like, if you're just casually playing this album like me, then you most likely wouldn't really catch that these lyrics are not happy at all. Until we get to 26, which is obviously the heaviest hitter in the whole album. Like, this whole album made me concerned for Hayley's well-being, like, as a person. I wouldn't say this album is amongst their best, but it's still a solid album. It's still a great album. But I wouldn't say it's anywhere S tier worthy. I would probably say, I don't know, I wouldn't know yet. If I were to really rank this album, and by the way, this is the last album, by the way, of this video, I'd probably say A. It's still a great album. Not one of their best, though. It's still good, though. It's still fire. It's still a banger. It's still a sad banger. So I guess that's it for my opinions and my thoughts on Paramore albums throughout the years, as they only have 5 albums apparently, which I thought they had more, considering they're like a fucking 17-year-old band or some shit, like a 16-year-old band at least. No, not even that. They formed in like 2003, so they're like fucking 19 years old, about to be 20, and they're about to release a new album this year. Hopefully that's true. They said they would. At least Hayley did. She better not be capping, dog. I'm gonna need that new Paramore. We haven't had any in like 5 years. So yeah, see ya. Oh, and also Stan Paramore and Stan Hayley Williams.